Jesse, cue it up. Everybody in their places. It's time to go.
Are we rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Okay, let's get it done, everybody. Let's go. Hey, Reagan, how's my hair? Is it okay?
Poxy, they can't see you.
All right, come on, let's go. Let's do this, people. Poxy, start on page 4. Get the
Here we
lines
are.
right this time.
All right, I got it this time, I swear.
4, 3.
Come on. It's time for the Ghost of Hollywood.
Well, hello, wall crawlers. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and thank you for joining us for the 48th episode right here on The Ghost of Hollywood.
That's right, and as we near the end of our 5th season, we also welcome a brand new year with 2026 already well underway.
It's not a race, Ragan.
Oh, what's wrong? Can't keep up, old man?
Yeah? No? Well, maybe.
Anyway, with a new year and another new episode, we are excited to have tonight's guest, director Jennifer Reeder, in-house to discuss her work on several of her feature films and various shorts she's directed throughout her ongoing career.
And she has definitely stayed busy with their latest release, Perpetrator, which stars Alicia Silverstone, out on the block right now, that's right. More on that later. We will also discuss her approach to writing for her own films and how she works to stylize each of them to effect, which has become a signature component with each of her features.
Simon and Lennox are also back at it with a brand new segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire, and I'm sure it's packed with plenty of cinematic stress, or at least enough to make a filmmaker consider a career change. And I'm Miss Reagan here with Poxy Leonard. Stay tuned because when we return, Jennifer Reeder will join us. We'll be right back after these messages, and don't forget, you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Miss Reagan here with Poxy Leonard, and we have director Jennifer Reeder joining us to discuss her work and career as a filmmaker and director for movies such as Knives and Skin, Night's End, Perpetrator, Signature Move, and A Million Miles Away, just to name a few. She's also an award winner of the USA Fellowship and Creative Capital. Now, that said, I'd like to welcome Jennifer to the show. Thanks for joining us. How are you this evening?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Now, to start us off, you came up through art school rather than film school. How has that education proven most useful on set and in your visual storytelling? And where do you think it most clearly differentiates you from directors with a traditional film school background?
For me, I think that my art school background is really obvious, not only in the way I lean into visual storytelling, but also maybe in the way that I don't always follow conventional rules of narrative, plot-driven storytelling. Making films in art school, both in undergrad and grad school. I mean, I only made films in art school. I was never a painter or photographer or a performance artist or anything like that. But I was surrounded by people who, were leaning into color and texture and abstraction and the surreal. There were sort of no rules in terms of how you could kind of bend the universe around you or represent it. So I really adapted that into my filmmaking very, very, very organically. And so I think I think it's obvious, but I also feel like at the end of the day, I like to think that I still am making art. And so what's helpful is with my collaborators, whether it is the crew, everyone behind the camera, the production designers, cinematographer, the gaffers, the production assistants, and then the actors in front of the camera, or in post, the editor, the composer. Everyone has to be sort of on board with the idea of making art or making cinema that is art or making sort of artful moves rather than making, I was going to say the right move. I'm just going to say the right move, or the more kind of film school move, I guess.
All right.
And so I've been really lucky to have worked with a lot of the same people over and over again, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, who are down to get weird and stay weird.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like, and you've talked about that in previous interviews. You know, you've even said like that the understanding and the vulnerability presented like on the set for people to understand what you're doing is really critical. And particularly like you mentioned this in a way that you write dialogue has been, you know, very stylized, and that you prefer like minimal improvisation. So like what qualities do you look for in actors who can understand and execute that kind of language? And how do you direct like performance to keep it precise without it feeling too rigid?
Well, so I'm based in Chicago, and Chicago is known to have both a very rich theater community, Steppenwolf, Goodman, for instance, Red Orchid. We're also known to have an outstanding improv comedy community. So The Annoyance, Second City, Improv Olympics, I could go on. And so I have loved casting a lot of my actors from that Chicago community, and in particular, casting the comedy people, the improv comedy people in dramatic roles or even more sort of deadpan roles. I just find that people who are used to performing live really have to be able to read that room and flip that performance, you know, from line to line, depending on the kind of reaction they're getting from the audience. And so I like working with actors who are really nimble like that. I mean, on the one hand, it helps make the day, you know, if you've got actors who can take a note and then turn that into something really quickly, so that we can kind of like keep going with with that scene and the next scene and the next scene. But I find that actors, you know, both dramatic stage actors and then the improv folks, they are they're also, you know, not just willing to get weird, but willing to take some risks in terms of a performance. And so for me, I oftentimes like to write sort of melodramatic, stylized dialogue, but then drain all of the melodrama out of the performance. And, you know, like I mentioned, really lean into deadpan. I feel like the combination of a kind of a deadpan performance with a very sort of like overwrought or melodramatic, you know, line of dialogue or monologue, it just is a real uncanny combination. And even when I've worked with, you know, someone like Alicia Silverstone for Perpetrator, she's such a good actress and has been acting for so long that even though she doesn't, you know, we brought her in from LA and she's not, I mean, she's definitely in comedy roles, but she's not like a live comedian or live stage actor.
Yeah.
But she really understood who the character that she was playing was, and just really committed to it. And I knew that from the very beginning, and in an initial conversation that I had with her, just to sort of make sure that she sort of understood who I was as a filmmaker and what kind of performance I would need from her. And she was super down. She was the first one when we would go over notes, would be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Let's do the scene. We're making art. And I mean, not to say that she was like throwing it away, like art is, making art is easy or superficial, but she just understood that we were making a different kind of a film, and she did so well on that. So
does it do basically? So does the physicality or the micro expressions and a lot of the immersion of the actors, is that what you're getting at here, where you're understanding, where they kind of are able to interject themselves with the way that you creatively process this?
Yeah, I mean, I love to have an actor come to set with an idea of who that character is, and rather than sort of tell them who the character is right from the beginning. I mean, oftentimes when in the casting process, yes, there'll be some conversation about general properties of the actor, but I feel like if I've written the script right, then an actor reads the whole script and has an understanding of who that character is, and is able to bring a lot of themselves or their acting self to that role in order to kind of sew themselves into into that film. And it's very rare that I have encountered, day one with an actor and they just totally got it wrong, where I'm like, no, that's not it at all. You have to undo everything you're thinking about who that character is and do it this other way. I mean, I've been really fortunate in that way. I mean, sometimes within a scene, there'll be like a joke that I've written that's a very sort of Jennifer Reeder joke that maybe I'm the only one that thinks it's funny. And so I have to kind of talk a character through sort of how to deliver the line so it feels like a punchline and not just an awkwardly written clump of words.
All right.
But I'm not, I would say just really quickly that I'm not, but I have never encountered, for instance, like a sort of a method actor, someone who kind of comes to I think that's really rare in sort of the indie world. We just don't necessarily have time to prep that long or even shoot that long. And so again, working with theater people and working with the comedians, I mean, they sort of like come to set and then snap into their character and then snap out of it, and we go have lunch and they snap back into it, and we can go on about our day. So yeah, I appreciate that kind of that nimbleness also in the actors who I've worked with.
Now, from a line producing standpoint, what are the main bottlenecks you plan around, and what specific systems keep the production at the right pace or from stalling or falling behind schedule?
I think that for me, the most stressful part about pre-production is finding a location. That's been the hardest, or that's what stresses me out, because you write a script and you have maybe a hotel room in mind or a house in mind, or even, a river's edge, in mind. And then you start looking and places are not available for that time, or they're out of the budget, or not even considering lending to a film, or you might secure an excellent location and then that location falls through once you've even started production. So you have to scramble to find another location, or maybe you find the location and you get there and the neighborhood really resents having you take over a house for 2 weeks, and makes it kind of difficult for production. Or I've lost a location once we've already started shooting, and I had to beg for like one more day in that location. So for whatever reason, I of the kind of pre-production and even production crew, I value my location managers sort of above everybody, because if the location and the sort of adjacent locations are not happy, you don't have a set. I feel like everything else feels like you can kind of recover pretty quickly. And so, but then like when you're trying to kind of make your days, I mean, in an indie film, for instance, like Perpetrator, we shot in 20 days, which just feels really unheard of, because we were dealing with shooting for the VFX. We were also, had some kind of intense like hair and makeup changeovers, which is not insignificant. Some company moves for locations.
So you were awake for a long time.
A lot of blood resetting, this kind of a thing. So,
yeah.
So I think that it's just making sure that everybody knows at the top of the day what is being shot that day, and everyone works really efficiently. There's no one just standing around. So, and we had a little more time on Knives and Skin somehow, even though that was a much smaller budget. But it's even with my short films, you're sort of, it's the exact same thing, sort of like making sure that everybody is in sync for the day, and that if you lose time on one scene, you have to make it up. You have to make it up someplace else. And I feel really fortunate again. That I feel like I run a tight but really calm set. I think freaking out when something unexpected happens on set as the director is no way to kind of like make your day also.
Yeah, and I know earlier we had touched a bit on your stylized dialogue, and I was curious, so when it comes to your films, how do you direct the adult characters so that they can be flawed without turning them into caricatures? And while still keeping the teenagers' inner lives at the center of the story in your films such as Perpetrator or Knives and Skin?
Okay, so for one of my short films, A Million Miles Away, that's from 2014, which is also available for free on my Vimeo page if anybody's curious. That is a film that involves about 22 teenage girls and one adult. The adult cat is Jennifer Estlin, who's actually one of the co-directors of the Annoyance Theater. Again, a great improv group here in Chicago. Stephen Colbert mentions Annoyance quite often.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
And she had been in New York for a long time, was on Law and Order. I mean, she's a very, very experienced actor. And the teenagers were not. I had to sort of at the core of that scene is as a girls a girls choir. So all I wanted from the teenage girls when I was casting the film was that they had to sing. And so I was less concerned with their ability to act. And I was also, because it's a short, I was able to cast teenagers to play teenagers, which often doesn't happen on a kind of a longer film when you have to keep somebody on set for 12 or 14 hours a day. You get into a lot of sort of like labor laws, as one should, when you're dealing with someone who is under 18. But with a short where you're on set for maybe 8 hours, I was able to cast 14-year-olds to play 14-year-olds. So in that film in particular, like the teenage girls, their vulnerability is real because they really are 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. And having them with their genuine sort of vulnerability and sort of genuine kind of openness in terms of how they were acting, meaning like not trained, that gave Jennifer something to work on, Jennifer Estlin, who was the adult. And then Jennifer's real professionalism like gave the girls an anchor. So I like doing that. I like kind of mixing up actors who maybe have a lot of experience and are very consistent with their performance in the scene. And then maybe a younger actor who plays it a little looser. There's something that can be really nice about how the less experienced actor can kind of can sort of juicy up the professional actor, and the professional actor can sort of again be a kind of an anchor to the less professional. There's something that's really also, again, it's like that combination of the sort of like melodramatic dialogue and a kind of a deadpan performance. This kind of combination of experienced and non-experienced just, I think, makes a sort of more flavorful performance and more flavorful kind of like volley in terms of that kind of dialogue.
Have you ever received like specific feedback from teenage viewers? And has that feedback ever changed how you wrote or edited a film?
I have gotten not negative feedback. I have, maybe they just keep it to themselves, although I feel like teenagers are only willing to kind of like tell adults when they're doing it wrong. But
so
the live feedback, for instance, that I have gotten from teenagers. Okay, so to bring up A Million Miles Away again, only because that was a short that really traveled around the world, and I traveled with it. And so I was able to experience that film with a lot of audiences, but specifically audiences filled with, in particular, young women. And I would be chased out of the theater from by young girls just being like crushed out on that film. And it was really, I didn't expect that. I just was trying to honestly make a film about someone who was having an adult who was kind of having a meltdown at the most wrongest time ever. And I sort of inadvertently made a film that like a short film that felt like a kind of an anthem for young women. And so and when I set up to make Knives and Skin, which is kind of the mothership to A Million Miles Away and Blood Below the Skin and Crystal Lake, which is like a kind of a triptych of shorts that I made leading up to Knives and Skin. And Knives and Skin is related in terms of those short films as like the kind of the mothership. Um, and Knives and Skin has a lot of young women of color in it, and in their in very significant roles. And so when I was touring around with Knives and Skin, which had a lot of exposure at genre film festivals, I was, I was exposed to all of the, genre super fans who are young women of color and who rarely see themselves as the final girl, or as a girl in the film at all. And so that felt great, to to sort of experience that film with audiences who saw themselves in a film and saw themselves survive the whole film. And so in terms of what that taught me, it was just like, do more, make it bigger, make it bloodier, like, really make a film for those, make a film or make more films for those fans in particular. I mean, my work is really pretty polarizing. I think you either get into the frequency and you're in it and you enjoy it, or you are totally lost and you kind of hate it. And then you go on Letterboxd and say something.
You mentioned Letterboxd, and I was
say
like, I've read
something really
reviews.
say something really really mean. I feel like there's I've never experienced someone for whom their reaction to my work is very like meh. It's sort of like one thing or another thing. So I don't make my films for the people who, decide that, write something very uninteresting, like I can't get those 2 hours of my life back or whatever. But I do make the films for the people, especially the young women who have just really felt seen and validated in the characters that I've written.
But do you think that in being in maybe provoking cynicism or a negative response for some people that this, even though that it is some kind of repudiation within themselves, that you're making them aware of something they might not be keen on within themselves, and that is a part of the art they've subjected themselves to?
I mean, I don't sort of sit and dwell and think that like I messed up. I mean, there's plenty of moments in writing the script when I'm just like, oh, that's a terrible scene, I'm going to take it out. Once I get to the filmmaking part, I feel really good about the script I've written. And then there's times in editing when I'm like, oh, the scene's not working. We either have to fix it or reshoot it or something. Like, I feel very aware in my own skin of when something isn't good or working. So I never, when I sort of am exposed to the negative feedback, I never think I messed up. I think that I think that people are lazy, and it's the same with sort of adults for whom like their favorite food is chicken nuggets. I mean,
yeah, I get where you're at. Yeah,
right. I mean, there's a way that there's sort of like a lot of people, and I don't think it's like, I think that for the most part, the genre fans are just rabid cinephiles, and so I don't mind getting a thoughtful kind of critique that's even if someone didn't like it from someone who I feel like is a real cinephile. They know cinema, they sort of understand what I'm doing, but maybe it's not for them. It's like the kind of knee-jerk responses from people who are just basic and can't be bothered with something that feels like it's a little more internal or allegorical. And honestly, I also think that there are I think that there are people who don't appreciate maybe my dose of kind of feminism.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Or
I even felt
that
like
that I sort of like put in my films. So I don't think I messed up in those regards. I think that people are chicken nuggets.
well, yeah, I mean, I guess I asked the question because, like, watching it, you get this. You had mentioned in previous interviews of the introspection of the teenagers is often much more there than the adults themselves. That we should give more, and I agree with this. That we should give younger people more credit to their awareness. That they are quite aware, but sometimes not able to interact or control those situations, and particularly with parents or adults who are doing things that can complicate their own lives. And
Yes.
maybe that is hard for a lot of people to view that, knowing that they can internalize that. Like there is a certain type of film where people internalize that within themselves and they start to go, well, am I this? Am I this? And is this a problem? And rather than dealing with it or seeing that as something to go, well, shit, they look at it more as like, I'm going to put this barrier up here and
Become
this filmmaker
defensive.
is in my mind and get out.
Oh yeah. Okay, totally. I do feel that, and I've gotten some of that. I've got some of that feedback in Q&As, even where people have a real reaction to the adults, both the kind of moms and the dads, where they don't understand why why some of the moms are sort of so mean and why some of the dads are so vacant. And I mean, and I do feel like I write complicated adults, but I also feel like, right, I want to center the teenagers. And I've certainly said this before in interviews, though, that I like for my films also to suggest that the coming of age process is sort of lifelong. And so I think that we find my adults at a kind of crossroads in their life where they're either going to kind of get their shit together and evolve and have a very fulfilling rest of their life, or they are going to lean way into the dysfunction and sort of spiral into living in the basement. And I think that there's that sort of pointing some of that out, right, can make someone feel really really defensive.
Well, yeah, I mean, but you seem like you're no stranger to being able to respond to it in the way that the way that you put it on screen definitely depicts that. So, but now I want to talk about like the lighting and stuff, because there's a lot of creative focus in what your lighting is and in accenting things. I know it's more prolific in some films, for instance, like Knives and Skin, where in background or in certain areas it's accented under the like say the counters and things of that, particularly with high fluorescence or pink. But there was also, like, say, at A Night's End in the refrigerator with the bottles. So like, to direct to the question, how did you and your DP design the relationship between the extreme colored lighting and the lensing, and like how much of that high color was achieved practically in lighting versus like what you created or intensified in post?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so again, I think that goes directly back to my my beginnings as someone making films in art school. When I look at a through my through my camera lens, I don't want to see the world as it actually is. I don't think of myself as. I mean, I enjoy films that are considered social realism, but I also think that I love the social realist films that I like also take into consideration, lighting and cinematography and framing and choose specific lenses, etc. But for Knives and Skin in particular, I wanted that film to sort of vibrate with a kind of femme energy. And of course, like no gender owns pink or purple, but we could sort of, think of pink and purple as maybe being like more feminine than masculine. This is maybe,
Okay.
or that's what I will state that for myself. So I wanted the film to feel like, it's just kind of like vibrating with this sort of femme energy, but also that it's hovering just above reality. And So there's never like the town is kind of made up. I mean, we shot it in Illinois, and I wanted it to feel Midwestern, but the Midwest is a pretty large, part of the country. Um, and so but I wanted it to feel like we don't know exactly kind of like where we are or when we are, because all of the songs that are adapted are songs from the 80s, and some of the fashion feels like it's a little of that era, but then other things are very modern. And so, but the lighting was the primary cue to let us know that we're in a space that hovers just above reality. And we shot Knives and Skin with Tadeo vintage anamorphic lenses.
All right.
Which also
That's
give
pretty
this
sick.
they're gorgeous lenses that also just give this little bit of kind of like haze kind of at the edges. So it also feels otherworldly or surreal, or again, like it's a kind of a fairy tale, or it's an allegory. And all of those decisions are are made way in advance. And again, with my cinematographer for that film, Christopher Hano, he and I had shot a bunch of shorts previous to that, and he also shot Night's End. And the gaffer for Knives and Skin is the head gaffer for Chicago PD, this very conventional kind of cop show here in Chicago, and where he rarely gets to kind of like flex and make weird lighting decisions. But he was on board from the very beginning for us to say, like, let's really pull out all of the kind of local or expected light, even in interiors. So everything has this, just feels like it's right, like the under counter light, which would normally just be a kind of a normal yellow light, was going to be pale pink. Or again, with Louis Lukasik, who's the gaffer, he was also our gaffer on Night's End, and did the same thing. We're like, why have him open up the refrigerator and it's just the expected refrigerator color? Wouldn't it be more interesting if it has this like slight, tint to it? I mean, Night's End is supposed to be a little more grounded in reality, but he does live in a haunted apartment. So why not lean into the surreal? But we tried to do all of that stuff entirely practically. So, but with Knives and Skin, what was wild about Knives and Skin, that we shot that in 2018, and that was all using lights and gels. And then by the time we shot Night's End, which was in 2021, we were using these kind of LED lights that you could just change the color with like a remote instantly. So it made, as opposed to Knives and Skin, where if we would put, like a magenta gel and it was the wrong colors, one of the
No, I
D&D
get you.
guys
Like
would
you're
have to
talking
go
like
and
as
change the
opposed
whole
to
thing up. Yeah.
Like you use, are you saying you use like a sky panel for like
Correct.
Night's End? Okay, I got
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And the same thing with Perpetrator. So, or was it with Perpetrator, it's like a combination of sort of like conventional kind of analog lights and gels, and then the kind of sky panels. But the sky panels, it can just make, if you're kind of like, no, more blue, less blue. Oh, I don't want blue at all. How about green? Then you can just do it instantly, but you're still doing it practically like on set. So, I mean, once we get to color, yeah, you can enhance some of that stuff, but we really try and make it look like it's going to look on set. And so, for instance, in Perpetrator, when we get to the sort of villain's lair, let's say, or his kind of dungeon or whatever you want to call it, we knew that was going to be just like just completely fogged in like a cyan color. And it really was. And so we shot that at in a basement of a Spanish bookstore in the Pilsen neighborhood. And that basement had been like a cupcake factory.
All right.
So there were two big kind of like room size coolers that we shot at. I mean, they weren't. It was cold down there, but they weren't functioning as coolers when we were there. But for instance, so all of the actor holding was in like a different side of the basement, had normal light, felt normal. And then we would bring the actors into the other room, and it was just this like fog of cyan. Like the whole thing felt really otherworldly. And I think that some of the actors were like, what in the world? Or sometimes it would be cyan with one other weird light. And when you walk onto the set and you're not looking at the monitor, it can just seem like none of us know what we're doing. And then I would be like, come and look at Video Village. Come and look at what the camera is seeing. And then they would look at it and like, oh, okay, now I see now I see the magic you're making. But I really like to work practically, even with all of the blood. I shot a short film in LA in 2018 for Halloween. And they were like, don't, we're not going to use any practical blood. It's like too hard to reset. We can add that all in post, which I had never done. And so I don't, even though it's hard to set practical blood, I like to use practical lighting, and I like to use practical blood.
All right, and it's time for a quick break here on The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard with Miss Ragan, and we are speaking with director Jennifer Reeder about her work and ongoing career in the film industry. Stay tuned, more of that in just a moment, but we're going to turn things over as we take a quick break to my buddies Simon and Lennox. That's right, they're going to bring us another terrifying tale from the depths of the cinematic dumpster fire. So, that's right. Sit tight, baby. It's going to get wild. And then after that, of course, we'll be back to continue our conversation with Jennifer. Stay tuned. You are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
When it comes to making movies, anything can go wrong. And tonight we're here to discuss that on the Cinematic Dumpster Fire.
What's up, everybody? This is Simon here with my man Lennox, and it's time for another terrifying segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire. And for tonight's tale of cinematic disasters, we talk about the death of United Artists following the release of Michael Cimino's 1980 film, Heaven's Gate. Why Heaven's Gate? Well, if you don't know already, Cimino went the distance both creatively and financially to the detriment of UA's new executive team, who thought they had an award-winning director on their hands. Instead, the production dragged, over 1 million feet of film were shot, the movie was edited and re-edited, and above all, a 7-figure picture quickly grew to a healthy 8. And at the time of its release, the critics went to town with the production and the resulting film, snaring any hopes of ever making it financially viable.
The story, that like the movie, will never end, but the downfall it brought to the new Hollywood era is real, and serves as one of the largest shifts in the industry to date.
It's true. Anyway, as the tale goes, this nightmare begins where the dream of a film called The Deer Hunter ends. After a success with Deer Hunter, Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate is slammed for being one of the biggest film disasters of the 20th century, especially for its doubling down on the bet the film would be a success and sacrificing all the economic leverage United Artists could possibly have to offer. But tonight isn't so much about what happened with Heaven's Gate, because that story has already been told. Instead, we're going to focus on the financial mess left in its wake, and on how this would contribute to the fall of the director's era in the then New Hollywood.
Well, there's an angle.
And it's a lot, so I'll cover what I can here. After the premiere of Heaven's Gate blew up the scenario, and by that I mean scared exhibitors and distributors like hell, UA executives turned to further damage control in what was at first believed to be containment, but quickly became a catastrophe. And that was pulling the film from theaters shortly after its premiere, only to re-edit and release it a short time later. After an emergency meeting between the executives Andy Albeck and Norm Auerbach, financial containment became the name of the game to inhibit further losses on advertising, prints, and well, a lot of things really. But this left the parent corporation, Transamerica, asking a lot of questions concerning who had been overseeing this production and approving its ballooning budget.
At that point, the financial oversight went directly up the ladder, and by 1981, Transamerica had lost faith in UA and its executives after they failed the fiduciary test. Their convictions with Heaven's Gate, and the faith in the creative process, was now haunting them around every corner as it became clear that when it concerned finances, diligence was weak.
And with all of this leading into the sale of UA to MGM, Albeck and Auerbach hit the chopping block before the deal closed so that Transamerica could send a message that change was in effect as a part of the transition. And in that frame, power shifted. And so did the initial idea and concept of United Artists, which had long prided itself on creative autonomy. Enter none other than Kirk Kerkorian, who saw opportunity in UA's global distribution structure and distressed but viable assets. So MGM found an appeal when they knew Transamerica needed a buyer to get UA off their balance sheet to maintain confidence on Wall Street.
As a result of this deal, MGM UA Entertainment Corporation was born. With the culture death, Transamerica got out clean, and MGM now had access to UA's brand equity, consolidated library, and distribution.
Krikorian continued the work Transamerica had started by seeing that conditions that allowed a film like Heaven's Gate to exist were eliminated from the slate. The new philosophy became asset protection, not creative risk-taking, and MGM became the green light for any production under UA. Fast forward to the modern streaming era in 2022, and we see something similar when the creative no longer aligned with the budget sheets and competition caught hold. But that's a different story for another time. With that, it's time to turn things back over to Poxy and Ragan as they continue their conversation with director Jennifer Reeder. This is Simon here with my man Lennox, and stay tuned because you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
Now, switching gears a bit, but where do you feel the most personal, lived-in elements of your own life show up in Knives and Skin? And how do those experiences shape specific characters, relationships, or parallel in the tone of your other films?
So in Knives and Skin, the most true thing that exists in that film is the strange relationship between the teenager Joanna and the substitute teacher. So when I was a senior in high school, we had a substitute. No, he was a student teacher, for my Brit Lit class, and I was a 17-year-old. And he was probably 27, and we had a poetry assignment, I think. And so we were getting our folder full of, sonnets back. And in mine, at the top of my pile of sonnets was a sonnet that he had written. And I thought everybody in the class got one. And it turns out it wasn't, it was just me. And it was like a very sort of passionate, love sonnet that he had written to me. And it freaked me out. I did not have any kind of relationship with him. But it was a 27-year-old who was, pursuing a teenager who was in a position of a student teacher. I mean, I told my mom at some point, and she said, well, do you feel intimidated? And I was like, I don't know. I guess not really. I mean, now, if that would happen to one of my children, I would call the school immediately, right. But it was a different time. And my mom was just like, do you feel threatened? And I said, I don't, it's just a poem, I guess. I mean, he would start calling my home and, definitely was pursuing me as sort of dateable material. And, but again, I said, nothing happened. I was interested in other 17-year-olds, not 27-year-olds. But I wasn't really able to figure out how to translate that experience into a film until I made Knives and Skin. And I really just wanted to explore this idea that that there are a lot of adults who feel completely free to sort of indulge in their desires with no
repercussions,
no second thought about boundaries or how that might affect someone else. I mean, obviously, it's sort of come out, and sort of Me Too, Epstein, there's a lot. We sort of understand that sort of that pattern now. But I wanted to inject that aspect of my own autobiography into Knives and Skin to sort of suggest that, that everyday horror can also be just a young girl trying to kind of live her life without some adult, trying to kind of just disrupt her happiness and her evolution. I mean, my experience wasn't something that was extraordinarily traumatizing or anything like this. It was more annoying. But as an adult storyteller, I was just looking back, that was a horrible thing for that person to do. And he was totally willing to kind of risk his future as as a high school English teacher because he wanted to date me or have me pay attention to him or something like that. But what's not autobiographical, for instance, like in Knives and Skin, is like my own relationship both to my mom and to my children. I have a great relationship with my mom. And she
doesn't wrap the pillow in foil.
No, not
right,
not
good.
even remotely. and I have a good relationship, I think, with my children, partially because I also, as a parent, I think it's really important that we kind of compartmentalize our own emotional life. Like my kids don't care if I've had a good day or a bad day. And so what I don't do is sort of, if I'm having a bad day, come home and go into my room and, wrap my pillow in tinfoil. I sort of like come home and am present with them as a parent. And then I can figure out later on how to sort of like deal with my own bad day. I understand that that's not possible for everybody, but I do feel like in both directions, I have a good relationship with my own kids, and I have a great relationship with my own mother. So a lot of that is either totally fabricated out of my imagination, or it's I've seen that in when I was a teenager, again, like the parents of some of my friends, the mistakes they make, or even now, like some of my friends, like seeing kind of the way that they navigate parenting. I borrow from what I've observed in that regard.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. When you're in the parenting game, you'd be looking around and being like, "It's getting squirrely out here." So like,
Watch out.
Now, what changed creatively and operationally when you moved from working with Christopher to working with is the first name
Sevdia?
Sevdia. Okay, I had it correct,
Yeah,
but I wanted to
Sevdia
make sure.
Castrati. Yeah,
Yeah. So
it's a nice Albanian Kosovar name, but I just call her Sev. So with Perpetrator, I wanted to work with a woman cinematographer, and it had nothing to do with Chris. And I had told Chris ahead of time. I was like, look, I've got this new film coming down the road, and we're shooting in Chicago. But I want to work with a woman. I hadn't attached Sev yet. I was sort of like looking around, and I mean, even though what was fantastic about working with Chris, and I've made other films with him subsequently, some shorts after Perpetrator, was that even though Chris is male identified and male presenting and all of this, he also is a very sort of gentle presence behind the camera. Mm-hmm. He's got a very soft voice. He's doesn't touch actors. I think that oftentimes if it's a close scene, literally the camera is close to the actor. It's the camera, then Chris, and then I'm kind of crouched over, Chris's shoulder, sometimes just to be sort of like in the scene and not kind of around the corner at Video Village. And so it has been nice, with knowing that actors feel, especially young women, feel totally safe around Chris. He's not going to, kind of touch them without knowing they're being touched, or he's not going to yell at them from behind the camera or anything like this. I've not experienced DPs who do that, but and I don't want to. So, it was just something that, like, working with, Chris so often, it just felt like it was a really nice, we kind of share a brain. And then working with Seb, I think is also, I wanted, I've worked with women DPs before, but it just felt like a really good opportunity to really just like pack the sort of like behind the camera with like as many, women as possible, but in kind of key roles. You often find a lot of women in the costume department or hair and makeup, but there's not always a lot of women in the camera department or like G&E. So, when we were putting the back of camera together, I was like, let's just pack this with women. And working with Sev was fantastic. I mean, like I had mentioned, she is from Kosovo and got into cinematography because she was documenting the war in Kosovo. She was in nursing school and bought a camera to document the war, and then really dropped out of nursing school to pursue cinematography and ended up at AFI in LA to study cinematography, and is now in the Cinematographers Union, and is like the first professional cinematographer out of Kosovo. I mean, she's just an astonishing person. And again, she and I really shared another brain for Perpetrator, which was also really important. And it was super fun to work with her, and to have a kind of like a true sort of sisterhood with all of the kind of the sort of departments. And so I worked again with Audrey Sirwatt, who was the production designer for Knives and Skin and Night's End and Perpetrator. Same thing, Kate Grube, who did the costumes for Night's End and Knives and Skin and Perpetrator. It was like, this little girl gang who put this film together, including Emily Gatto from Shudder, who was one of the producers. So it felt, thinking about like a set vibrating with femme energy. That was definitely what Perpetrator felt like.
How have I'm kind of changing the subject here a little bit, but we did talk about festivals some earlier and things of that nature. Now, how have festivals and awards functioned for you as like a means to, like secure distribution, get your work out there, press, financing for your next project, that sort of thing? And like, what is the revenue reality behind that compared to what like you have to spend on publicity and marketing to make that strategy work?
Mm-hmm. I mean, so I'll say that I either personally funded or funded through grants the shorts. So you had mentioned Creative Capital and USA. I got a screenwriting
and that's like just a bit of what you've done. You've done a lot more.
Yeah, right. And so I would I sort of like self-financed all the shorts, including festival entry fees and just everything from the very beginning to the sort of like the very end. I mean, at some point they would, the shorts would either get, rental fees, or they were getting rentals from, like broadcasts, especially overseas, or they were winning a lot of prize money. So I would just have like an account that I would put all that money back into. So I could kind of, at some point I was able to kind of like make the next short with money that I had made from the previous short. So it wasn't truly self-financing in the sense that I was like putting my own paycheck into it.
Yeah, like generating investment to make cash flow. Yeah.
Correct. And so then with, the funny part about like making then like a feature length film, I mean, it was nice to get paid, because for the shorts, I wasn't paying myself. I mean, everybody else got paid, but I wasn't paying myself. So, when it came to Knives and Skin, that was the first time that I had gotten, paid to make one of my films, which was pretty cool. And then Knives and Skin premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, which is also where Perpetrator premiered and where two of my shorts have premiered. So I have a very good relationship with the Berlin Film Festival. I love that festival. I feel like the European audiences sort of understand kind of my frequency or like my vibration on some level. And so that's felt like a really nice place for those films to have premiered. A Million Miles Away, which I mentioned previously, had its world premiere at the Rotterdam Film Festival, but then a year later was programmed at Sundance, which is a sort of a funny thing that the sort of American audiences sometimes have been a little bit behind,
Yeah.
Behind what I'm doing. Eventually, they're like, oh, now I get it. Okay, yeah, get that film in our festival. And so with Berlin in particular, there's the European film market happens where films get bought and sold. And so I felt really lucky, again, in terms of having those films, Perpetrator and Knives and Skin in particular, have their world premiere at Berlin, because then, we were able to sell it at the European film market, kind of like while it was still at the festival, which is not always the case. Sometimes you have like Sundance, a great place to premiere, but it doesn't have a market during the festival. And there's only a handful of festivals that really have a market that's happening during the festival. That's not to say that like, obviously during Sundance films are bought and sold, but it's not like in a one big sort of like venue.
It's not the AFM kind
no,
of
exactly, right.
Yeah.
And so, so that has, I felt really fortunate, with that combination. With Night's End, that was a film it's a Shudder original. And so we made that in 2021. And really, obviously in 2021, theatrical releases just were either being delayed or jettisoned altogether because we were kind of, still recovering. We still are recovering from COVID, but you know what I mean? And so that film was always going to land, that was always going to just land on the platform, was not, necessarily, it wasn't imperative that it have a festival premiere for it to get distribution. We always knew that it was going to, that it would just land on the platform, and that felt totally satisfying to me. We did have a screening here in Chicago because we shot in Chicago. We had a screening here in Chicago at the Music Box, beautiful vintage theater, and so that was great to have a kind of a week-long run at the Music Box here in the hometown of all the actors, so that they were able to sort of have it, deal with it have a theater experience for that film in particular.
They got a release.
Yeah. But look, it's like the pressure of, even for my shorts, like I would schedule production and post-production around whatever festival I really wanted my film to premiere in. So I'm someone who sort of like from the beginning really understood like festival and distribution as a strategy, as part of filmmaking, that you can't just make a film and then kind of cross your fingers and hope that one person sees it besides like you and your mother, but that you have to get it, you have to get it out into the world, and you have to get it out in the world at the right time and for the right audience, meaning at the right festival. And with Knives and Skin in particular, before it had gotten invited to Berlin for its world premiere, it was invited to participate in a work in progress screening at the American Film Festival, which is a cool film festival that happens in Wrocław, Poland. I know it sounds like I made it up, but it's
no, I understand. We're with you. Yeah.
It's a real thing. It's an incredible film festival that happens in this little tiny town in Poland. It's all American films. They have this really fantastic section where they invite maybe 3 to 5 films by American filmmakers. And it's a work in progress screening, and it's a competition. So, you have a chance to win some post-production, in-kind contributions. And so with Knives and Skin, I won a VFX a package, and I won the color grading package. I also won a sound design package, but because the film is so specifically Midwestern, I just thought it was better to do the sound back here in Chicago so that we had like the right birds and that we could really deal with like a high school football game, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But in December of 2018, myself and Chris, the cinematographer, went to Warsaw, Poland, and did the color grading in Warsaw and did all of the VFX in Warsaw, Poland, which was super cool. And those were in kind, so that was part of the budget that we didn't have to, that we could offset into something else. But part of that competition, they also invited a bunch of sales agents and festival programmers also to the work in progress. And so What the Films, which is a Paris and LA based sales agency, saw Knives and Skin at the work in progress in Poland, and wanted to be the sales agent. I mean, there was other people who were interested in being the sales agent once the announcement came that it was going to premiere in Berlin. But I really loved what the Films team, was talking about in terms of how they were going to, sell the film worldwide. And so we went with them. And then What the Films ended up being a producer for Perpetrator, and is also involved in 2 other projects that I have coming up. So, again, just like I like working with the same sort of people behind the camera. Right now, I feel like my kind of ride or die is this really awesome little sales company that's based both in LA and Paris that I met many years ago in a tiny town in Poland.
Well, that's a hell of a story there. That's a good one.
Now, we're short on time, but before we go, can you tell me what specific lessons from making your short films most directly prepared you for your features? And how did your understanding of what matters behind the camera evolve over that period in terms of planning, coverage, performance direction, and post?
Sure. So I think that I'll start with the sort of tail of that question first to say that,
Okay.
that a feature length film it's not different than a short in terms of, whether you're shooting for 4 days or you're going to shoot for 28 days. It's like it's all still those, they're just more days.
Yeah.
And there's oftentimes more people. And even when there's more money involved, from my experience, it doesn't make it easier. It's like whether you have a short that is you're making for $5 or a feature length that you're making for 5 million. It still feels like every day you go in there and you hope you don't lose the location, and you hope that your actors aren't sick, and you just hope that the weather cooperates, like all of those things. And
I'd imagine it's intense with more money like that. There's more on the line financially, so to speak. So everybody starts putting more pressure on you.
For sure. But that feels like a concept, that feels like a concept that happens before you're shooting and after. Like during production, it feels like it's the same thing. You're kind of just like, God, this is not any easier with more money even, and it's still, it's still just a pressure to kind of like make the day and make all the shots that you need, which happens even if you're doing a short and you're shooting it for one day. But conceptually, sure, if it's like more, if someone has trusted you with a lot more money, and you've also got the sort of visibility of some visible celebrity actors or whatever, that's a different kind of gray cloud of pressure over my head. But in terms of this kind of shorts from features, what I've learned is well, I always encourage young filmmakers to make as many short films as they can. And on the one hand, because features are it's longer, it's more money, but the stakes are higher. The pressure, as you mentioned. But I think that with a short film, you really can experiment with how you tell the story and find your own kind of voice and vision, which is what I was able to do with my short films. I was able to really experiment with certain moves in the short films that then I was able to kind of put in place in the feature, but I knew that they would work because they had worked in the shorts. So for instance, again, A Million Miles Away features this girls' choir, and they sing this song in the middle of the film. And so when I set out to make Knives and Skin, I knew there were going to be these singing scenes. The producers were like, "Oh, how is that going to work? Is it like, are we making a musical? Are the songs going to really like play?" And I mean, meaning sort of like work narratively. And I was like, look, I did it in Knives and Skin. I did it again in Blood Below the Skin. Those films went to Berlin, to Sundance, et cetera, et cetera. It works. I guarantee you it's going to work. And of course, I think that one of the things that people love most about Knives and Skin are like the choral scenes, the singing scenes. And I think that with shorts, audiences are more forgiving. So with a short film, I think an audience is sort of willing to kind of figure out what happens right before the first frame of the film and kind of fill in what might happen kind of after the film ends. And with a short film, you can kind of leave some narrative threads kind of frayed and hanging. And I love that aspect of short filmmaking, which is why I will always return to some short films. I mean, the hard part with making a feature is that you have to, even if they're weird features like mine, you do have to kind of, sew up some of those hanging threads and kind of give your audience some kind of setup and payoff in terms of how what the narrative is. But I do encourage like young filmmakers, especially if they want to kind of like make moves in the genre world, to kind of experiment with some stuff, experiment with those moves in short films where the stakes are a little lower. And figure out like maybe it fails. And then if it fails in a short, that's a lot easier to forgive than if you've taken a big swing in a feature, and then it fails there. That's really, that's a real heartbreak. But I will always, go back to making short films because I'm not done experimenting. I mean, I've got lots of weird ideas that right now I'm just like, oh, I'm not sure if that's ready for a feature. I'm going to try that out in a short. But through making the shorts, I really do feel like I have found and maintained, established what feels like my distinctive voice and vision.
All right. Well, Jennifer, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and you are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. We've been speaking with director Jennifer Reeder, and we'll be back after these messages.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Miss Ragan here with Poxy Leonard, and we've just finished speaking with director Jennifer Reeder about her ongoing work and career in the film industry.
We'd also like to thank Simon and Lynn for all their hard work setting up another segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire, and to our sponsors at KBOO Community Radio in Portland, Oregon, for their ongoing support of the show.
And of course, above all, thank you for listening and supporting this episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. For more information on the show, please visit our website at theghostofhollywood.com. The show is also streaming wherever you get your podcast and airs late night on KBOO 90.7 FM in Portland, Oregon.
All right, wall callers, callers, or crawlers, or whatever. I can't say nothing right anymore. Anyway, that wraps it up here for episode 48 on The Ghost of Hollywood. We will be back with a brand new episode as we continue to bring season 5 to a close. So stay tuned because we have plenty more in store as we kick off 2026, baby.
And that's all we wrote. I'm Miss Ragan here with Poxy Leonard. Until next time, everybody, good morning
And good night. You like that?
Oh, you trying to take it from me now?
No, maybe. Thanks.
This is my thing. Good night.
You've been listening to another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. The Ghost of Hollywood was created by Zach and Ragan Flannery. The show is written by Zach Flannery, with composition, mixing, and mastering at Leonard Shure Studios by Lennox Flannery. For more information, please visit The Ghost of Hollywood at theghostofhollywood.com.